Hello, chat. How is everybody this fine evening? And I want to be the first to welcome you to the first Wattpad Wednesday. Uh, this is going to be a shit show. Uh, this was a horrible, no good, very bad idea where I sit here and read random Wattpads that were found for me by the community, by you guys, and submitted using exclamation point request. You can drop in there, request a Wattpad, and I will read it on stream. We have a couple to go through tonight. If we get some more requests as we go along, figure that one out. Tonight's goal, whether you need to go to sleep to some smut, whether you enjoy my sultry speaking voice, or you need my lovely radio voice to speak to you in your ear holes, I'll be there for whatever you need. So I guess without further ado, we should get right into it. Part 1, House of Gold, 68.9 thousand views, 952 stars, and 2.6k comments. I have no idea what this is about. I don't know what House of Gold is, if that's a thing that exists, if that's an IP that already exists. Unsure. But here we go. Oh, it's bad spelling already. Danny looked at the apartment where his best friend and crush of 3 years waited. He saw him in the window, and he waved at him, and his heart started beating too fast. He opened the door. "Hey, silly, get in," he said, and Hen gulped and pulled his luggage into the house. Drew hugged him. "It's been so lonely since Amanda went missing in Afghanistan." "That's so brace of her. She loved you." Drew stared at him for a minute. "Yeah. Let's get you settled in," and then he helped him to his room. "It's a one-bedroom place, so you'll have to share a room with me." He smiled at him. "It'll be like a sleepover." "Totally." Then there was a knock at the door, and Danny followed Drew to the door, where they found a girl with long brown hair and big purple eyes waving. "Hi," said Drew. "Hi," she said, flipping her hair back, revealing her badass studded belt around her black jeans and black top that had sleeves to her middle arm and skull earrings and black makeup. Oh, here we go with the emo again. Thank you for the link. Here we go with the emo theme again. "I'm your neighbor Jackie," she said happily. They both shook her hands. "If you need anything, come on over," she said, and then left. "She was nice," said Danny. "And pretty cute," said Drew. And Danny felt a pain in his heart. Was Drew totally straight? He always wondered if he was bi because of how he flirted with him sometimes on Skype. He didn't know if he could tell him he is gay and is in love with him. Then Drew gave him a sweet smile, and he felt warm again. Part 2. Heavy. Drew made a drink for him and Danny and sat at the couch and drank beer. Sorry, let me try that again. Drew made a drink for him and Danny and sat at the couch and drank beer. They turned on a movie and watched some funny TV shows and drank all night until it was 7 a.m. the next morning. Drew pointed at the rising sun. "Hey, Dan, look," he laughed, drunk. Dan stumbled over but tripped and fell right into Drew's arms. Suddenly, they were starting in each other's eyes. Their faces started itching closer and closer when suddenly there was a knock at the door. Drew blushed and let go of the embrace and went to the door. "Hello?" he asked as he opened the door. There were two guys in black ski masks, and they grabbed Drew and threw him down the apartment stairs and ran off. They kidnapped him. Danny tried to run after their white van but couldn't run as fast as a car. He called the cops and cried in the apartment. Then suddenly he got a message on YouTube that said, "If you want to see him alive again, make a video about 10 reasons why the Paul brothers are awesome and you're wrong." He gasped. There was a knock at the door. Danny went over to it and gasped, "Logan Paul!" Meanwhile, somewhere in Costa Rica, Drew had a bag on his head and he was punched hard. "Let me go! I never got to tell Danny I love him." Well, in that case. Then he was shoved into a van and they started driving. Danny made tea for Logan and he started to look at him sweetly. I'm so sorry. The Team 10 will help you find him. I almost kissed him before he..." "It's okay." He touched his hand. They looked sweet at each other. "I'm always here for you." Logan leaned in and kissed Danny lightly on the lips, and in a moment of desire and desperate, he pulled Logan close and kissed him harder. They started making out, and Logan got on Danny and started rubbing on him. They made out and wiggled around the couch until Danny broke away. "I can't. Drew." "Oh, but he was a loser." "Go, Logan, go away." He grunted and left mad. Danny went to his room to cry. Part 3. Coming home. The door slowly opened and Drew limped into the apartment and fell on the floor. "Danny!" he said hoarsely. Danny stopped crying and ran out and gasped. "Drew!" He ran to pick him up and help him stand. Drew grabbed him and hugged him tight, and sudden, his lips started touching his and they kissed. Their tongues meshed and their lips intertwined, and they made out right there. When they stopped, they smiled at each other. "Be my boyfriend?" said Danny. "Yes." And they smiled and kissed again. "But I have to tell you, Drew, before you came back, Logan was here, and we made out." "Logan Pale?" he roared. "I'm sorry." Drew started crying and ran down the stairs. Then Jackie looked Drew's way that he was running, and then Van came in. Danny was crying and told her what was going on. "You should really do something romantic to show your story and that he is your one and only." "You're right." He wiped the tears off, and Jackie grabbed a camera and started recording. Danny looked sourly to the camera with love in his eyes. "Hi, Greggs. Today I finally told Drew I love him like I said I would. But before that, someone else came over, and I kissed him. I love you, Drew, and it will never happen again. You are my light and joy, and I would be proud to be your husband," he said softly. Then Jackie whipped a tear from her face and sniffled and turned off the camera. "That was amazing. I'm sure he'll say yes. It's true love," she said. Part 4. The story so far. Warning. Suicide and sex scene. Meanwhile in Chicago, Drew was at a sushi restaurant while someone sat beside him. "Drew Gooden?" he said. He looked up. "Jake Paul?" He almost flinched. "Yeah, I heard you and Danny had a rough thing happen." Then he posted this, and he pulled out his phone and went to a video and opened it to let him watch. Danny was looking at the camera intense and started talking. "Today I finally told Drew it'll never happen again. Never kiss him again. I'm with someone else." And then there was a sniffled sound, and someone was behind the camera. Danny started to cry silently, but tried to look together. "Let me buy you a drink." And Jake ordered sake, an Asian drink. They started drinking and started talking and laughing and having a good time. "Maybe I was wrong about you, Jake," said Drew. Jake put his arm around him confrontingly. "Of course, baby." They both drunkenly left the bar and stumbled to the hotel room Jake was staying in. Jake started kissing him and pushing him to the bed, and they made out there. Then they started doing it. But Drew didn't know about the camera. It was being live streamed. "I love you, Jake," cried Drew on stream. Danny and Jackie watched, shocked and dumbfounded as they watched. Jackie looked at Danny, then black at the video. How could he?" Danny stormed around the house. Jackie tried to call him down, but Danny opened the window and jumped. Jackie screamed and called 011. Believer. Drew woke up with a hangover and threw up. Then he heard his phone ring and he picked it up. It was Jackie yelling to the phone and calling him shit for what he did to Danny. "What?" said Drew. "He said he found someone else." "What?" "No, he didn't. I'm sending you the video he made for you." Then she hung up and got the notification, and he got the notification for her. He opened it, and his lover spoke words of love right from the heart. He spun around and glared at Jake. "You liar!" he screamed. Then he threw his phone at Jake and ran out. Meanwhile, in the suicide hospital, Danny was sitting in a chair watching a TV show when a nurse said, "You have a guest." He expected Jackie again with some McDonald's or something, but instead, Drew. He flinched. "What do you want, traitor?" he hissed at him. "Jake lied to me. He made me think you moved on, and I slept with him." "Are we even? Can we be together?" "If you can forgive me." "I do." "Forgive me?" "Yes." Then they embraced and kissed. Danny pulled away and knelt down and pulled a box out. "I was going to do this somewhere better, but will you marry me?" Drew cried happy tears and nodded, and they made out again. "Let's get you out of here," said Drew. They left holding hands. Chain reaction. Danny got out of bed where his fiancée was sleeping, and he went to the bathroom. Then he spotted something in the sink that he guessed Drew forgot. He picked out the sink and looked. It had 2 lines, and it was a pregnancy test. He busted out of the bathroom. "Drew? Drew?" he said. And Drew sleepily got up and then gawked at what was in his hand. What is this? Are you..." He looked down ashamed. "I'm going to the doctor tomorrow to check. Please go with me. They can do a test." He gulped. "Okay." In the morning. They waited in the office of the doctor office until they called Drew's name. They went in and the doctor came into the checkup room they were in. "Are you his husband?" asked the doctor. Danny nodded. Well, we have to test his pee, so if you'd step outside. And he did, and went back in after the doctor came out with a cup of pee to test it. He sat next to Drew and helped his hand. The doctor came back in and stared at his chart. Stared at his chart. Well, Mr. Gooden, you are pregnant, and Mr. Gonzalez isn't the father. They both dropped their jaws. To be continued. In the next part, White Wedding Part 1. It was a hot July day, and the concert hall was decked in white everywhere. Drew and Danny invited their fans for free to see their wedding, but so many wanted to come that they had to get a concert hall. There's a preacher and a pretty white arch and music playing and food outside. In the room with Drew, he was putting on his white suit and brushing his hair. He got a knock at the door, and someone popped in. It was Ethan and Gila Klein. H3, he said, and they went over to hug him. I'm so excited for you, said Hula. Thanks, Ethan. Will you walk me down the aisle? My dad doesn't accept I'm gay and won't do it. He started to cry a little. Ethan hugged him. Of course, buddy. And he out his arm and looked it, and they walked slowly out. They stood at the start of the red carpet that went to the arch, and Drew laughed nervous. And Ethan pat his arm, and they started walking as the wedding song started playing. The fans went crazy and clapped, and they stopped at the preacher and stood by him and waited. They looked at the entrance and waited for Danny. First, Jackie came out to be the bridesmaid, and Jenna Marbles did too. They looked so pretty. Then PewDiePie came out with Danny on his arm. They both smiled, and Danny blushed, wearing his baby blue tux. Drew started crying because he loved him so much. The music kept playing, and Jenna Marbles' dogs were in front of them, with little rose petals baskets in their mouths, and petals flew everywhere as they ran up the aisle. Danny stood across him, and they looked at each other with misty eyes. The press smiled at both of them and started talking. Drew Gooden, do you take Danny Gonzalez to be your husband to hold and love forever as long as you both live? Drew nodded. Yes, I do. And Danny Gonzalez, do you take Drew Gooden to be your husband to love and cherish for as long as you live? I do, said Danny. The fans all looked so happy and crying, and Jackie and Jenna and Ethan and Gila and PewDiePie all cried happily too. If anyone thinks these two should not be married, speak now. And the room got quiet and nobody breathed. Then someone stood up from the crowd and jumped on stage. It was Logan. Logan Paul? Danny said. Yes, I don't think they should get married. He's carrying my baby. He shouted and the whole room gasped. Drew started crying and wished he was somewhere else. Jake Paul fans started screaming for Logan and Drew to get married. Then Ethan started going into Logan to push him away from the stage. Then suddenly fights started breaking out with all the fans, and Drew and Danny ran away with the others escorted them. They all got into the limo and drove off fast. To be continued. In the next part, White Wedding Part 2. Danny, Drew, come out here. Ethan and Jenna and Jackie and PewDiePie were outside the cabin that they were staying in until everything blew over. Danny looked out the window and gasped. Outside was a big talise with roses and lots of food on a table, and music started playing. There was balloons and everyone was dressed up. No way! They went outside. What is this? They both asked, blushing. We felt bad about what happened, so we made you a nice private wedding with just us, said Jackie with a big smile. They all hugged Ethan and said, I can marry you, I do Jewish wedding. Wait. They all hugged and Ethan said, I can marry you, I do Jewish weddings, but it can still count for you, he said. Then Danny put out his hand and Drew took it. Shall we? He nodded and took his hand. He led him to the roses and Ethan stood between them. Now, Drew Gooden, do you take Danny Gonzalez to be your husband? Will you love and cherish him in his sickness and in health? I do, he said softly. And Danny Gonzalez, do you take Drew Gooden to be your lovely husband through poor and riches for as long as you both live? Yes, I do, said Drew back. Ethan smiled. First, Drew? Yes, babe. I want you to know. I want to adopt the baby. Drew had happy tears in his eyes, and Ethan said, I now pronounce you man and husband. And they fell into a kiss. The end.